Hosting an hour of true stories and information, tips and updates of the latest research and necessary information in the caregiving field, focusing on you, the family caregiver. An Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert, Marcia has 15 years of hands-on experience at Arden Courts, a leader in assisted living dementia communities here in the U.S. Marcia covers everything you need to know as a family caregiver, especially if you care for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease or other related dementia or chronic illness. If you have a friend or relative that is also a family caregiver, call them now. They won't want to miss a minute. And let them know they can watch on caregiversolutions.info. And they can listen on WNN 1470 AM in South Florida or nationally on the iHeartRadio app. Now, sit back, relax, and learn from our host, Marcia Teal, as she brings information to you that may just be the caregiving solution you need.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Caregiver Solution Info Show. I'm glad that you could join us again this week. We have another wonderful program for you. If you tuned in last week, you know we talked about senior dental care. It was such a wonderful program with a lot of great information. And at the end, we gave a website for you to go on to check out some tips if you find it difficult to get your loved one with dementia to brush their teeth. I'm not sure everybody received that information, so I'm going to give the website today, and it's mouthcarewithoutabattle.org. So just go to that website, mouthcarewithoutabattle.org. When you do, it brings right up some tips, some charts that tells you what will happen and how you can fix it and what you can do to get your loved one in different scenarios, which is a great segue to today's show because we're going to be talking to a dementia coach who has lots of experience helping caregivers dealing with problems that they encounter with their loved one. And this is going to be a great show because caregivers not only need information about dementia, different types of dementia, but they also need practical tips. As a matter of fact, just last week, I was over at our Sarasota Arden Courts, and a caregiver shared with me. She said, you know, a lot of caregivers have been caregiving for a long time. They already know a lot about the disease. There's not a lot to know about it because there's no cure. But she said, I think what we really need are coping skills. I think that is what caregivers crave. And I'm sure that being at home now, we're in the 9th month of this pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. Everybody's at home. Everybody's getting a little bit more frustrated, not having their regular routines in place, and maybe getting on some nerves of each other with your loved one or other family members. It's natural. It's normal. But we need coping skills how to do that. So today is all about that. And joining me to talk about that is an expert dementia coach, Dr. Kate Mccarty. Hi, Dr. Kate. Welcome to the Caregiver Solutions Info Show.
Thank you, Marcia.
Well, I'm glad you're here. You're one of our frequent flyers, as they say, coming onto the show because you add so much information and such valuable information to all of us that can tap into your experience, your expertise. You have over 40 years experience in the healthcare field, I know, and since 2012, you've actually been in business for yourself as a dementia coach, helping caregivers figure this out, figure out what to do, when to do, how to do it, why to do it. It's not easy, as any caregiver will attest to, but with the right tips and information and guidance, we can help make their days and their journey a little bit better. So that being said, first of all, you know, I want to talk to you about a routine. Now, you know, people are home and everyone's routines have changed with the pandemic. We can't go places we usually go to. We can't see people we usually see. We're stuck at home more, and we're kind of out of a routine. And most of us can deal with that. We can find other things to do. But when it comes to somebody with dementia, why is a disruption in routine so detrimental to their day?
There's so much that relies on processing the brain, processing any kind of change. I just had it happen at my house, just because we had to have dinner a little earlier, because having dinner later would have been more stressful. And of course, Mike has early stages. So it's amazing how the tiniest thing can really make a difference. So to get to why that is, of course, as you said, we know there's there's changes in eyesight, there's changes in hearing. And I think there's an overall, and I'm going to go out on a limb here, caution button that's right there, even though a lot of things aren't working with the brain, that something new could be dangerous. Teepa talks about fight, flight, or fright. Yeah, fight, flight, or fright. So I think we do have a somewhat of a fear with change, and I think that's very much increased as the brain changes. I mean, as a caregiver, you're confronted with, well, this is not the man I remember, or that's not how he used to respond, and the same is going on for them. Like, what is she doing? Why is she doing this? It's a trigger. So that being said, routine for some of us, personality-wise, can be deadly. It's like, because we like a lot of change and energy, which makes a challenge. And even spatially, there's a difference. We are now in a two-level home, and so I spend an awful lot of time in a separate level. Early stage, I can do that. That's not going to happen later on. I know that. It's so much a day-by-day situation. Now, we know, Marsha, when people move into Arden Courts, they have a brand new routine. And people learn, no matter where their cognition is, they have procedural memory and they will learn. I mean, rarely does someone have trouble finding their room in a nice, well-designed memory care, because the procedural memory is there. And they know at about 12-ish, they're all like little migrating birds. They're heading back to their house, right? So there's some predictability, and that's a comfort zone. That's why memory care works so well. Smaller, routine, yes, activity, not too much, not too little. Just right.
Yeah. Well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that routine is good, because without it, it kind of elicits a little fear in somebody not knowing what's going to happen next. And people with Alzheimer's disease, they really do better in a routine knowing what's going to happen next. And it doesn't mean that every single minute of every day has to be exactly the same, but the major things, to have them to be the breakfast at the same time, lunch at the same time, dinner at the same time. And you mentioned Mike, your husband with dementia, got a little upset because you had to do dinner a little earlier because you were going to be on the show today. So right there's a perfect example. So they get kind of out of their comfort zone. They don't know what's happening. You're messing up my routine. And sometimes not only can they be uncomfortable, but sometimes it can cause them to be a little bit agitated even.
Yes.
And so a lot of caregivers don't know what's causing their loved one to act the way they act, and it can be many different things. But one big thing can be a change in routine, and that might not be something that a caregiver would necessarily look at, because it's a little change for us, but it could be a big deal for your loved one when they're expecting something to happen at a certain time and it doesn't.
Yes.
Yeah, so routine is really important, and I think that one of the best things caregivers can do at home is create, if you haven't already, while you're staying home, create a new routine. They will get used to it if you practice it and keep at it over and over. Like you said, they can learn some newer things with cueing, and cueing is very important. We'll talk a little bit about what cueing means in a few minutes. So I'd like to, Dr. K, give you some scenarios. I'm going to throw some things at you, and these are real life scenarios that I've seen happen, you've seen happen over and over again, and we're just going to put it out there and talk about it and how a caregiver could try different tactics to try to resolve the issue when they're having a problem with their loved one, getting them to do something, right? So This is what we're going to do, and I'm going to throw the first one out. My husband won't get in the shower. No matter what I do, I can't get him to take a shower, and he's stinking. He fights me. I don't know what to do. Dr. Kate, what can I do?
This is a tough one, and it often goes back to personality. First, personality, and also keeping in mind that people are moving back in time and how they process the world. So for many of us, we didn't have showers when we were children. We had bathtubs, which is a nightmare. I'm not saying that's a great idea, because the other thing is, you notice how people don't raise their leg the appropriate distance because of their eyesight change. So I'm not saying the bathtub's a great idea, but there's a lot of unknowns with the shower as time goes on. There's a lot of fear of being naked. I love Tifa Snow does a great job with multiple towels, which I think it must be a facility, because nobody would waste that many towels in a darn house. but I get it, you know. So there's a lot of privacy, dignity with towels, right? For my father-in-law, I took care of him, and I remember what always worked was a sweet treat that was literally in the shower, like, you know. And it depends on the person's preferences and what might lead them there. Had to be ready. The times where I didn't have everything I needed in that bathroom were always a disaster. I mean, like everything. The heater had to be right. Ideally, you have a heat lamp, which we don't all have, but it's a lovely way to prep for for the ongoing stages. Having all of that without them knowing that you're all prepped. It's a lot of work. I don't say this lightly, because I know it is a lot of work. Sometimes it's, and rather than the yes, no, don't ever ask a question they can say no to. They will always say no. No is a very safe answer. Right? And sometimes you really do hoodwink them. I know that's probably a very ancient term, but there's a little chicanery, trickery that goes on, you know, like, hey, I got this new soap, come smell it. And of course, soap is a trigger, depending, right? So there's a lot of little steps that can try to entice them. And to be honest, there's some people that are just not going to go that route. You may need a shower chair. You know, I remember, and it was at Arden Courts, I think it took us 3 months to get one man fully showered, and we gave away an award to the aide that did it. But we had the wife come in with a bikini and a beer. That didn't even work. He was an old boater. So again, using biography to try to, you know, yeah.
I'm sure that man didn't go 3 months without getting clean, and you had other tactics like that.
Yeah, but we wanted to get a full body, you know, right? And no, he was getting a hair. He was actually going to the salon and getting his hair done, but we just weren't getting the entire situation all at once. So
and in that case, for the caregiver, if a caregiver at home has that problem, you know, you can do sponge baths. You can, if it's a nice day outside, you can go outside and play in the water like we used to do when we were kids. You can, you know, water the car. Right, wash the car together, get them wet, get some soap going on there. You got to be creative, and I think a lot of it does come down to being creative. But first and foremost, I just want to remind the caregivers, before you do anything for your loved one, something that involves them, you know, especially like a shower where they can be a little bit intimidated, you want to always let them know what's going to happen. You want to preface anything that you're doing with, I'm going to get the water running now for your shower. I'm going to, go ahead and get your clothes laid out. We're going to, get dressed. Tell them what you want them to do so they're not surprised, because sometimes people just start doing and it just kind of startles somebody, and you want to make sure that they understand what's coming next, right? The other thing that I want to comment with what you said was absolutely you got to use whatever trick you have in your book. And when you mentioned the towels and you mentioned Teepa, I want everybody to know that you're referring to Teepa Snow. She's another dementia expert, and she's very well known and goes all over the country doing presentations. And you can look her up on the internet and go and take some of her tips too, because she's really, really interactive. And so you were mentioning Teepa Snow and the towels. So you were referring to when someone's modest, putting towels on them in the shower so, they're not really showing awe, and then working around the towels. And yes, it might cause some little extra laundry, but if it gets the job done, why not, right?
Oh, yeah. It's worth it, for sure. And I think that's a shower chair situation, and literally washing through the towel. So they're not really ever making that skin-to-skin contact, which is so frightening. And the senses are so different with everyone, depending on the touch sensitivity. So it's and I'm pretty sure that one's on YouTube, bathing. So that's very helpful. Oh. The other thing is sometimes you're not the one. Sometimes you're not the one. Maybe it's your son. One of my favorite places years back was a little memory unit, and when there was one man that I was the only one that he would let me shower him. I don't know what that magic was. Somewhat stance though. He was an old football player, and he would like crouch and weave, and I would do that too as we walked. And I made sure everything was set up, and I always had. They had radio. I mean, they had a Bose system. So we always had marching tunes. So I think it brought back football, and we were able to, but meanwhile, we would just trade roles. They would be the activities person while I was the aide. And that is a beautiful flow that you can have in a community. Maybe it's a son, maybe it's an aide. Those are all possibilities, because sometimes it's probably because of your relationship. I mean, it's almost an honor that they don't want to do that, right?
So the bottom line is try different techniques, try different people, do whatever works, whatever, if you have to bribe them, sing. I mean, a lot of times just singing in the shower. People laugh about singing in the shower, but it's a good way to distract them while you're getting the job done. So we got to go to commercial break, and we'll be back with more tips from Dr. Kate.
Arden Courts is not just a place to live, it's a place to call home. Residential living combined with quality caregiving. This is the philosophy behind Arden Courts. Communities created exclusively for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia who would benefit from a safe and structured environment. For additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides, call 888-478-2410 to locate a community nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help because memory care is all we do. Remember, call 888-478-2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides. You are listening to your host, Marcia Teal, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on caregiversolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
I'm talking with Dr. Kate Mccarty. Dr. Kate is a dementia expert, dementia coach, coaching caregivers on ways to have a better relationship and a better way to cope with their loved one that may be suffering from dementia. So we're talking about scenarios and different ways that we can get our loved one to do what we need them to do. So we just talked about the shower. Let's talk about the fact that we need our loved one to go with us.
Substantial major lifestyle changes. They can really slow down or even halt the progression of cerebrovascular disease, so vascular disease in the brain. But past a certain point, if people have enough brain damage, they don't know enough to be consistent with those lifestyle changes. They may not be on board with those lifestyle changes. So there's always sort of this push and pull between quality of life. You know, I want to eat what I want to eat when I want to eat it. You know, I don't want to exercise today. Versus long-term outcomes and preserving brain function. What you will often see in a vascular dementia is what's called a stepwise decline. So with conditions like Parkinson's disease dementia or frontotemporal dementia or Alzheimer's dementia, the decline is fairly steady. I'm having trouble doing that because it's in the reverse on my screen. So the decline is fairly steady. With a vascular dementia, there's a stepwise decline in the sense that there may be a stroke, a small stroke, and there's a decline. And then things might get a little better until the next stroke, and then there's another decline, and then things may get a little better until the next stroke, and then there's another decline. So it looks like a set of stairs. But I do want to reinforce that there is some hope with vascular dementia, that it can be halted.
Okay, but now let's talk about Parkinson's disease dementia, because when people think of Parkinson's, they normally think of people that shake, that have tremors, that maybe have difficulty walking and can't use their arms and legs as well. But a lot of people don't realize that then going forward, there could be dementia also with Parkinson's disease. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Of course. So Parkinson's disease dementia and Lewy body dementia are very, very similar. So when somebody manifests the motor symptoms of Parkinson's disease first, before they start to develop cognitive symptoms, they're often labeled as having Parkinson's disease dementia. If a person displays the cognitive deficits first, and then they develop motor symptoms later on, they're often labeled as having Lewy body dementia. But in essence, the conditions are very, very similar. So whatever I say about Parkinson's disease dementia can also apply in large part to Lewy body dementia. In general, Parkinson's disease dementia leaves people a lot more functional cognitively than the other types of dementias.
Okay.
Often there's an awareness that there's a problem with Parkinson's disease dementia, unless that dementia gets very advanced, okay, unless it stages rather quickly. People have a certain degree of preserved insight into their own problems. But that can be particularly frustrating for caregivers, because as a caregiver, if you have a conversation with your loved one and you explain something to them and they respond appropriately and say, yes, I understand, but then they go off and they do the exact same thing that they've always done, as a caregiver, it's very frustrating because you're saying to yourself, we just had a conversation. You repeated what I said to you. You told me you understood. And now you just went and, you forgot your walker, or you didn't get out of that chair properly, or you didn't get out of bed the way we taught you to. It feels like they're doing it on purpose, or they're quote unquote lazy.
So with all of these different types of dementia, are there also different life expectancy times of the person who has it as far as how long the person has the disease before they succumb to it?
So once again, with vascular dementia, that timeline's very, very variable. It depends on the severity, it depends on the progression, it depends on a person's lifestyle choices. With frontotemporal dementia, that tends to strike people who are somewhat younger. They can be in their late 50s, early 60s, sometimes even younger than that. And that progression can be fairly rapid. With Alzheimer's disease, the rate of progression often depends on when the symptoms were first noticed. So if the onset is younger in Alzheimer's disease, the progression tends to be more rapid. If the onset occurs in older adults, then the progression tends to be slower. With Parkinson's disease, Parkinson's disease rarely kills people. They'll usually die from something else. So that progression tends to be rather slow. Lewy body dementia, if someone's diagnosed with Lewy body dementia or a Parkinson's dementia with psychosis, then that progression can occur much more rapidly.
So why is it so important for caregivers, family, to find out what kind of dementia that their loved one has? Because sometimes they don't know. And why is it important to find that out?
It helps us know what to expect. And it helps us to ask the right questions. It may be reasonable to expect someone with vascular dementia to remember certain things. It may be reasonable to expect someone with vascular dementia to respond positively to being cued. Oh, do you remember when we talked about blah, blah, blah? Oh, yeah, I remember that. But with Alzheimer's disease, it doesn't matter how much cueing you give to somebody. The information isn't in there. It may be appropriate to expect someone with Parkinson's disease dementia to behaviorally moderate themselves, manage their anger. But someone with frontotemporal dementia may be completely unable to manage their anger. So the label is important. With Parkinson's
what
disease,
I'm saying is once we know and
Parkinson's
understand what kind of
people.
dementia our person
from
has, it's going to help us be able to care for them better and understand why they're doing what they're doing, and then be able to manage that behavior. That's what I hear you saying, Doctor. And that's why it's so important. So thank you for that explanation. That was excellent. We're going to take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, Dr. Domingo is going to share some of those behaviors of the different types of dementia and how you as a caregiver can manage that. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Arden Courts is not just a place to live, it's a place to call home. Residential living combined with quality caregiving. This is the philosophy behind Arden Courts. Communities created exclusively for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia who would benefit from a safe and structured environment. For additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides, call 888-478-2410 to locate a community nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help because memory care is all we do. Remember, call 888-478-2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides.
Welcome back to Caregiver Solutions Info Show. I'd like to take this opportunity to let you know about an offer that would be a great thing if you're a caregiver and you're caring for someone with dementia. Arden Courts is the national sponsor of this program, and Arden Courts is a leader when it comes to helping people with memory care. They have about 50 memory care assisted livings throughout the United States, and they help not only the person with the memory loss, but also the family and the caregiver by offering lots of different resources to help you on your caregiving journey. Today, they'd like to offer you this free book. It's called The 36-Hour Day. It's a wonderful resource for caregivers. I highly recommend it. If you don't have this book, all you have to do is send an email saying that you heard about it on the Caregiver Solution Info Show. Give your name, address, telephone number, and they'll be really glad to mail a copy straight to you. That email address is delray@arden-courts.com. Again, send an email. The email address is delray@arden-courts.com. And you can get a book and learn more about it. It's a wonderful book. You can read from beginning to end or pick chapters depending upon maybe what situation you're going through. But send an email and get this because it's a wonderful book. So today, special guest, Dr. Domingo. Dr. Domingo is a neuropsychologist, and we're talking about all things related to dementia and the kinds of dementia, why it's important to find out what kind of dementia person's been died with, so the caregiver care for them. So Dr. Domingo, we've talked about Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease dementia, frontotemporal dementia type dementia, vascular dementia. So once a person has the definitive diagnosis, after they've gone through the whole workup, everything that's involved in doing that, which we highly recommend, let's talk a little bit about some of these actual behaviors that can go along, and feel free to give examples because, you know, some real life stories. I know you have probably many to share, and what happens and how a caregiver can learn how to manage those particular behaviors so they don't go, you know, crazy themselves because, you know, thinking that, you know, I told you, you didn't listen, they repeat themselves. Once they learn how to manage a particular type of dementia, their caregiving efforts are going to go a lot smoother. Is that right?
Correct. And the most important thing to realize as a caregiver is that we're all works in progress. You know, we're all practicing. There's a reason why doctors open a practice, because we're always practicing and we're always learning. And as a caregiver, you're sort of opening your own practice too. Learning and evolving with your loved one's dementia. So it is perfectly normal at some points to get really, really frustrated, really angry, you know, to want to strangle your husband or your wife in a moment, don't strangle them. But the desire to in a moment is understandable. What you want to be able to do is recognize that you're a human being and those emotions are expected. And you want to have a set of tools to be able to understand what's happening with your loved one and also to understand what's happening to yourself emotionally. So I guess we'll talk about the highlights, like some of the big behavioral issues that come up with each type of dementia. So with Alzheimer's disease, the most frequent dilemma that I see from my caregivers is their desire, the caregiver's desire to help their loved ones see the reality. No, you have this memory problem. No, you cannot drive. No, you can't go back to work. You can't take the yacht out today. You can't cook. They're never going to get that. No matter how much we argue or how much we explain, it's like trying to hold back the tide. The disease always wins. There may, early on in the condition, there may be moments where there is some recognition, that I have a memory problem. And we can use that as caregivers. So if you have a loved one with Alzheimer's disease who will acknowledge at times that they have a memory problem, then we can in that moment say, well, maybe it's better if I go with you someplace since you do have that memory problem. And this way I can help you out if that comes up. But if they insist that they're perfectly fine, then the task really becomes about redirecting them to something that's safer or telling a benign lie. And there is such a thing as benign lying. We're lying to be kind. And the example that I use to help drive that point home with caregivers is, if you have an 8-year-old child and you find out that your husband is cheating on you, do you go and tell your 8-year-old child, I'm leaving your father because he's sleeping with another woman behind my back? No, you don't, because that 8-year-old doesn't have the emotional or cognitive maturity to process that kind of information. An 8-year-old cannot deal with that reality. And it's the same thing for your loved one. So, go ahead.
Yeah, it's so hard because they try to say, don't you remember? Remember when? And they try to push that point, and all it does is frustrate both of them, and it's a terrible thing. We got to go to a quick commercial break. We come back, we're going to talk more to Dr. Domingo about other dementias and some other things that are happening. So you don't want to miss it. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Arden Courts is not just a place to live, it's a place to call home. Residential living combined with quality caregiving. This is the philosophy behind Arden Courts. Communities created exclusively for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia who would benefit from a safe and structured environment. For additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides, call 888-478-2410 to locate a community nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help because memory care is all we do. Remember, call 888-478-2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides.
Welcome back to Caregiver Solutions Info Show. I'm Marcia Teal, and my guest today is Dr. Angelo Domingo, neuropsychologist out of Sarasota, Florida. And we're talking about different dementias, what they mean, why it's important to know what you're dealing with. So, Dr. Domingo, you mentioned Alzheimer's, and the big takeaway that I hear from that as far as caregiving for them is to try some redirection, get them to do something else that might not be hurtful or harmful to them, and distract them from it. And a lot of people don't like telling lies, and I know it's a little white lie, but you call it a lie that's going to be a kind lie, right? Because if you tell somebody with the truth, I'm going to believe you anyway and argue with you. And if you the sky is blue and they say no, you know, with the lot of it is just going with the flow and then changing direction, getting attention on something else, and that's what works really well with Alzheimer's, right?
It is critical. And the other reason behind a kind lie is you don't want to re-traumatize someone repeatedly. You know, how many times can you tell someone, you know, mom's dead? Right? If you say, you know, your mom passed away, and the person goes, oh yeah, that's right, and they're okay with that, you know, they're not distressed by that, fine, then it's okay to be honest. But if that starts a whole grieving process, you don't want to institute that whole grieving process again day after day after day. That's traumatic. So it may be beneficial to say, oh, mom and dad are on vacation. You know, you remember they had that lake house up north. You don't want to say remember, but, you know, you just say, oh, yeah, they had that lake house. They're at the lake house. You know, whatever you need to say to preserve that person's sense of safety in the world and continuity. Now, if we shift a little bit and talk about something like frontotemporal dementia, often what's critical in that, with that condition is boundaries. As a caregiver, having very strict boundaries. It is not okay to speak to me like that. It is not okay to threaten me. You know, people with frontotemporal dementia often need a lot of structure, a lot of routine, which is beneficial across the board for all kinds of dementias, but particularly for people with frontotemporal dementia. And they need clear expectations. If they are being aggressive or they are violent, then what's important as a caregiver is to know when you can't handle this on your own.
And that's critical, because I've actually seen caregivers come to see me, and a woman, a wife, she was battered. Her face was black and blue because she didn't know how to handle her husband when he got aggressive. She tried to reason with him, and she couldn't reason. So, you know, it's dangerous at certain points to know how to get out and get help, right? Because I'm sure you've seen this many, many times through your years.
Yes. And you want to spend more of your energy trying to avoid an argument versus trying to win an argument.
That's good advice.
And that often comes up with Alzheimer's disease or frontotemporal dementia. If it's not something that's grossly inappropriate or dangerous, then my motto is let it be. You know, if they want to wear the same outfit 5 days in a row, then just buy them multiple versions of that same outfit. It's not worth an argument, and you'll never win that argument. So you want to de-escalate, and you never want to match somebody's agitation. The more agitated they get, the calmer you as a caregiver should get. Which is a
It's
hard
hard
thing to do.
you say, but hard to do, and that goes to talk caregivers stress. All caregivers themselves in order to deal with the situation, like and get so it's so insidious. But we're talking about every different situation is different. No two people are going to look the same, be the same, act the same, and that's why it's just so confusing and overwhelming, I think, for caregivers, and why they need to reach out for help, because every, like you said, dementia has its own type and set of symptoms and behaviors. What about behaviors that are particular to the other dementia? We talked about Alzheimer's, we talked about frontotemporal. What about the others?
So vascular dementia, once again, is kind of a mixed bag. If someone is having small strokes in their frontal lobe, then their version of vascular dementia may look a lot like frontotemporal dementia. Versus if someone is having more strokes in their temporal lobes, then their version of vascular dementia may look more like Alzheimer's dementia. What's important to understand about vascular dementia is some days people are going to look really bad, especially if they've had an event like a small stroke. On a particular day, they may be especially impaired on that day, and then as their brain starts to heal, you may notice that they seem more like themselves. So you want to be able to take a quick assessment of your loved one each day, each morning, to see really where they're at.
I've actually had caregivers say, "Oh, he's cured. He's better. He got better. He's fine now. He was really bad, and I put him into a memory care unit, and they cured him, so I'm taking him home." That is not the case. It's just because some days are better than others.
Right. A good day is a good day, and that's all it is. And a bad day is a bad day, and that's all it is. It's important to recognize that these conditions are ever changing, especially vascular dementia. So if one day happens to be terrible, don't despair that every day is going to be terrible. And if one day happens to be great, don't get your hopes up and think that every day is going to be great. You really have to meet your loved one where they're at in that moment. Especially, in the case of vascular dementia, if they're having frequent strokes. With Parkinson's dementia, that's rather different from the other types of dementias, because
why the smile? Why the grin? Why the grin when you talk about Parkinson's?
Well, I really love working with my Parkinson's clients because they have a level of insight that just isn't there with my other clients who have dementia. So there's that. I have an affection for them. But also, it's fascinating as a neuropsychologist to see how they can work around a problem. If you think about your brain as a business, with Alzheimer's disease and frontotemporal dementia, it's as if all the executives have left that business and there's no one there to make any decisions. You have support staff, but no one there to give direction, nobody there to steer the ship. With Parkinson's disease, the opposite is often the case. It's as if all the executives are there, but all the support staff has left the building. So as an example, in my other line of work, I work for a major disability company reviewing claims. I have an entire support system there. They find the files for me. They send me the files. They tell me exactly what my schedule is going to be. They tell me exactly what I need to answer when I look at the files. If I had to do all of that on my own, I'd be so overwhelmed that I wouldn't really be able to do the decision-making work. And that's what it's like to have Parkinson's disease. That type of dementia, especially when there's no psychosis involved. Sometimes there is psychosis involved, and that's a different can of worms. But typically, with your standard Parkinson's dementia, people's reasoning abilities are relatively preserved. It's just that they can't juggle all the information in their head at the same time. So they may come to what seems like a reasonable conclusion to them with the information they can hold in their head in that moment. Do we have time for me to give you an example?
Well, we have 5 minutes left, and we can do an example, and then I want you to share how people might be interested in contacting you if they have questions, if they're in the Sarasota area and they want to, meet up with you. So, yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I had a client with a prototypical Parkinson's dementia. He was a classic case, and the condition was very advanced, and it took him 20 minutes to go from the door to my couch. And my office is not that big, but that tells you how advanced the condition was. So he sat there, and I asked him, we'll call him Jim. I said, Jim, what do you want to talk about today? And he said to me that he wanted to discuss driving and I could see that he had really thought about this. People with Alzheimer's disease will often say, well, I'm a perfectly good driver. They could have mowed down 5 people on the way to my office and, crashed into a couple of signs, but they still think they're fine. He said to me, I haven't been behind the wheel in many years. And I just want to see if I can do it. So I was thinking, on a Sunday morning, going really early, going out with my wife to an empty parking lot so nobody's there, nobody can get hurt, I can't hit anything, just to see if I can do it. And if I can't, my wife will be in the car with me to take the wheel. He had really thought this through. And then I said, well, Jim, you can't lift your head up. Your head is perpetually down. Because of the Parkinson's, he can't pick his head up. So you really can't look out a windshield. And he thought about it, and he thought about it, and he said to me, you're absolutely right, I can't. I didn't think about that. And that's the hallmark of Parkinson's dementia. People don't think through an entire problem because they just can't hold it all in their head.
Wow, that was a really good story, because I was following you all the way through, and I was waiting for the end, and it's almost like a surprise ending, because he physically could not do it. In his mind, he was figured it out, right? So there's so much to learn. So Dr. Domingo, there's so much to learn. Caregivers can tap into resources the Sarasota area and they want to contact you. How can they do that?
So they can contact me through my website, which is angelosdomingo.com, or they can contact me through my email address, which is angelosdomingo@angelosdomingo.com, or they can simply give me a call. My number is 941-822-6122. And if I may say, through the wonders of teletherapy, I can see anybody in the state of Florida, not just those people in Sarasota. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. We have to take into account, working with the pandemic and doing all the wonderful technology. So Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm sorry we're out of time. I had so much more I wanted to ask of you. Maybe you'll come back and share with us another time, because
I would love that.
Well, I would love to have you. You're such a wealth of information, and you can feel the passion. I can feel the passion coming through that you have for your clients, and they're very lucky to have you for help. So thank you again for being on the show.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
And thank you all for tuning in. Be with us next week, same time, same place, 6:04 p.m. every Tuesday on caregiversolutions.info and on the iHeartRadio app under WNN. Thank you all. Have a good night and stay safe. See you next time.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Solutions with Marcia Teal. Join us next week as Marcia, who has 15 years of Alzheimer's disease and dementia care experience, brings you more needed information to help with the care of your loved one. This show can be seen again on caregiversolutions.info, and questions can be left on the site, which may be used on the program to help others. See you next week for more Caregiver Solutions.